If you had to assign a probability to that statement that you believe extraterrestrial intelligence has visited this planet, what probability would you assign?
100%.
100%. That's just unbelievable.
Chris Lehto, welcome to Lehto Files.
This is an interview from 2023 SALT conference with Dr. Garry Nolan.
And so perhaps can you give a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I'm a professor in the Department of Pathology at Stanford. The primary research work in my lab is cancer, immunology, virology. We also do a lot of work in biothreat, so we've worked with Ebola, Zika, COVID when it was a big problem. Primarily the work in my lab is the development of instrumentation and algorithms to understand the complexity of the immune system in cancer. And in the process of doing that, we've created any of a number of technologies which we've spun out into companies. It's now 9 companies, 2 of them are on NASDAQ. And these immunology instruments are used pretty much around the world in almost any advanced immunology analysis and work.
Okay, so he's world famous and he's created a ton of amazing technology really with cancer and immunology.
Understood. And I'm curious, do you believe that extraterrestrial intelligence has visited planet Earth?
I think you can go a step further. It hasn't just visited, it's been here a long time and it's still here. And it has basically, people talk about the wow signal, looking for extraterrestrial intelligence. The wow signal is that people see it on an almost regular basis. That's the communication that's already here.
And that statement seems so incredible that it's tough to believe, right? Like, people hear that, and maybe a lot of people hear that, and they don't believe it. And so I'm curious, if you had to assign a probability to that statement that you believe extraterrestrial intelligence has visited this planet, what probability would you assign?
100%.
100%. That's just unbelievable. This mirrors Colonel Carl Nell's argument that NHI, non-human intelligence, has been here for a long time. And he had all the clearances, military clearances. I did a reaction video to his recent SALT conference interview. You can check it out on the channel. But this from Garry Nolan, 100%. I mean, he is a renowned doctor, esteemed doctor over the entire world. To say 100% is just amazing. Not 99%, not I'm kind of sure. He says 100% puts everything on the line.
And that's not just my opinion. I mean, look, the National Defense Appropriation Act passed last year, signed by Biden in December. 30 pages of that is the establishment of an unidentified aerial phenomenon office, the establishment of looking into the harm that's happened to any of a number of the individuals, going back to 1945 and looking at the disinformation and misinformation that has been basically articulated over the decades. 12 US senators have signed on to a document that basically says we want the information. The establishment of an office, ARROW, in the Department of Defense has 25 people working in it right now. And what's their goal? Collecting the information across all of the U.S. Department of Defense intelligence offices, and collation of that into a uniform format for the very first time, and provision of that then to Congress. The creation of a whistleblowers program specifically that allows people from within, who I'm going to say this, who've been working on the reverse engineering programs, reverse engineering of objects, so that they can come in and break their oaths, but it's specifically just to talk to Congress and give that information in classified settings. And that the most recent one that happened was just last weekend, and it created quite a hornet's nest in Washington.
Okay, so yeah, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023 really was fantastic. It created the Aero Office. We've seen really terrible results from that. Dr. Kirkpatrick, who was leading it, noted skeptic. He said right from the beginning that there's no evidence of NHI. He's been saying that ever since. So the Aero Office hasn't really lived up to any, I guess, hopes that we had in the UFO community, at least for those people that want disclosure of UFO information, UAP information. But the NDA Act for fiscal year 23 did give a lot of protections to whistleblowers, and that's where we got the 40 plus whistleblowers, now over 50 whistleblowers. So it did start the snowball, right? And the fiscal year 2024 NDAA was totally shot down. The UAP Disclosure Act was fully hamstrung, crushed essentially by Mike Turner and Mike Rogers in the House. But like you mentioned, there are 12 senators, man. That is a lot of senators signing off. And Mike Rounds recently said that he is furthering UAP transparency in the Senate, and Tim Burchett has also created the UAP Transparency Act in the House. So they're still pushing on.
And so let's just create kind of like a logical framework here. So we start at the top. We say now there's 100% probability that extraterrestrial intelligence has visited Earth. Now we have to go down to why that statement may be true, why you believe that statement is true. What is the evidence? And I think perhaps we all may have to read between the lines a little bit here. You may not maybe divulge everything, but in your opinion, what do you believe to be the most compelling evidence to support that statement?
Well, I think the most compelling evidence is you just need to look at what your government is doing right now about it. I mean, just go and look at the number of politicians, and this is interesting, on both sides of the aisle who have come together and signed off on this statement. I mean, I was involved last year with putting together some of the wording of the NDAA, which was passed into law. So, I mean, so what are they basing their opinions on? They're basing their opinions on the dozens of individuals who, in one manner or another, have come forward and talked to them in classified settings. So that's the first thing. Then my personal experiences with the individuals who are, the one person who actually was involved with collecting a lot of that original information, and then my experience with people who, frankly, I know have worked or are working on the reverse engineering programs.
I mean, if you could imagine you're a politician, you know, Marco Rubio, Chuck Schumer, Mike Rounds, these guys, big-time senators, you know, well-known, maybe aspirations for president, and now they're saying, yeah, we support looking into UAP disclosure, UAP transparency. And Chuck Schumer stood on the Senate floor and said that there is UAP information the government has that they are not releasing. I mean, you can imagine that. It's not like it's going to necessarily help your career. So they must have a lot of people coming to them. Marco Rubio even said that they've had many people in high positions, currently serving in high positions, saying that all this is true, that there's a crash recovery program and that there's actual biologics, right? NHI biologics, however you can define that. So imagine it's not easy for these guys just to come out and say this. It's not necessarily a huge career helper.
Okay, so let's take one step back. Reverse engineering programs.
Of downed craft. Now, the first question that people will ask is, well, if they're so frigging advanced, why are they crashing? Because what's crashing is not actual living things. I mean, I use this example a lot. If you wanted to study a tribe of cannibals in the middle of the Amazon, are you going to go yourself and show up in the middle of the tribe and not hopefully become dinner on the other side of it? So if you're an advanced intelligence, you know, I don't think we're all that advanced, frankly. You're not going to basically put your life and limb at risk by coming here. So mostly what you're seeing here are either drones or some sort of advanced AI or whatever it is. I mean, look, we're already dealing with an alien intelligence in our own emails, right? Our own Chat GPT, et cetera. We don't even know what it's doing. So imagine if you were a million years ahead of us. How do you have a dialogue with something like that? Or what is it that could possibly do?
Yeah.
That's super interesting. Saying that these could basically be drones, that kind of mirrors what David Grush has said, is that they call it biologics because he said some of this may not have even been alive. Like, we don't know if it was actually ever alive. And then you hear about the weird aliens like the Greys. They don't seem to have any like genetic transfer information. They don't have any sexual organs a lot of the times, right? Also, how do they digest food? And you just hear strange stories about these possibly being like biological drones. Could they be just some sort of manufactured biologic organism in order to interact with us or communicate with us and then keep the actual NHI, so the real aliens, the real non-human intelligence, safe? Or can it not even interact with us? Maybe it's on some whole different level of existence, level of life that we don't understand yet. I've proposed scalar forms of life, so larger macro life. Could that be one of the answers? Very strange that they would be drones, that he argues. And then you wouldn't really care if they were crashed or shot down. Often they actually are just there totally unmanned. I've heard stories like that where the craft is just sitting there operational, but no one's in it. It's like a gift, like they're being gifted here or something.
I'm glad that we've got some people here to witness these statements. I think they're very consequential. And so we start with now 100% probability of extraterrestrial intelligence. We go to evidence. We now talk about downcraft. We see the government moving in a certain direction. Presumably the downcraft is made of some material. Presumably we could test that material. I know you've done a little bit of work firsthand. You have seen some material. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Right. Well, so what is it that you hope to discover out of a material? So let's just go back, just briefly, and why would you want to do it in the first place? So basically, a grain of silicon, back in the 50s or 60s, changed our entire culture and world, right? So something as small as that, the discovery of what you could accomplish with a little piece of germanium doped with the right elements, changed our understanding. Now, so we have multiple simultaneous sensor systems that have seen these objects go from 50 feet above the water to up to 14 miles and then back in less than a second, all right? That's just a truth. The U.S. government has confirmed that these kinds of measurements are done. Now, they're very careful what they say. They say, well, we have no evidence of ET. Well, because, no ET is going to come walking in here and say hello, right? But if you read between the lines on the flip side of it, it does stuff that we can't do. We know that the Russians and the Chinese are not doing. And so if you can go from 0 to 5,000 miles an hour and take a right turn and not end up squished like a bug on the windscreen on the other side, if they have windscreens, then what is the physics that accomplishes that? So what that tells you is that we need to rethink our physics, first of all, to say that, well, we saw birds fly, so it took us 3,000 years when we figured out how to fly. But now we see these things doing this. So what is it that lets us do? So I know some of the physicists on the inside who work at some of these big defense corporations who basically said, oh, well, here's how you tweak even general relativity to accomplish that. But then you say, well, how much energy is needed to do it? Well, more than the whole nuclear output of the planet per day, per movement. So you start to backtrack and you say, okay, well, who could do that? Well, we can't. Will we be able to do it in 1,000 years? But if we had a piece of any of this, let's say it's 1,000 revolutions ahead of us, or 1,000,000 revolutions ahead of us, even a tiny piece of knowledge from that could revolutionize what it is that we're doing. I'm always looking for the opportunity. I look at the upside of this. I'm not worried about them coming and, raiding us or taking our women and children. That's not my concern. My concern is how do we use it?
Yeah, that's amazing statements there. If you look at material science, it's probably the biggest single benefit that you could reverse engineer, right? If you see it's possible to make something where you see some material that can hold amazing energy, just how it's structured, that could give a huge benefit to any military, obviously, right? And this would be the main reason why they're keeping this secret, so they're not allowing this information out. And Garry says that we do have the information. The government does have the information. If you look at the Nimitz case, Gary Voorhees, he radar technician, said that when the Nimitz was captured by the actual Roosevelt, so a highly classified, very accurate, top secret radar on that ship, an Aegis class cruiser, that radar data was taken. It's taken by people in Air Force insignia, which is highly non-standard, right? The captain actually came down and said, yeah, give it to them. And we've heard nothing more about the Nimitz, right? So during that case, they said that the UAPs moved from right above the water, 50 feet, up to 28,000 feet, and then immediately. So how could you move around like that? I've argued that they know how to manipulate light. So they basically able to turn their ships into light or somehow move like light would move, right? With no weight, no inertia. It's the only way I can consider it. So he says there, we do have the information in the government, and if they could get a small piece of that, it would be a huge advantage, huge revolution for our military. That's the main reason, one of the main reasons they're not going to share this information.
Yeah, and I'm curious, do you have confidence that you, us collectively, will have material, literal physical material to evaluate, to analyze?
Yes, 100%.
100% again, okay.
It's there. It's there.
It's
I mean, I could say this. I was working with a group about 7-8 years ago, and I literally got within a few weeks of gaining access to one of the objects. And when the people who didn't want us to gain access to it found out about it, they pulled some bureaucratic administrative tricks and snatched it away.
It's wild. And
That's amazing. So he says right there 100% that there were materials, and he almost got to it. Again, being protected by a small group of people, it sounds like.
And so now we have you, Dr. Nolan, making this bold statement. You are well positioned to make this statement. Now maybe we get into like some fun. Let's like feel comfortable hypothesizing a little bit as to what is happening. Like what is it, right? Like, and nobody's going to hold you to this, right? Now maybe we go down from 100% probability to now we're speculating.
Right.
Okay. Now let's speculate together. What do you think it is?
Right. So to do that, I'll start with kind of a mantra I've had for the last while. So, individual experiences of what people see is an anecdote, but an anecdote doesn't convince a scientist. What is it that convinces a scientist? Data, right? What doesn't convince scientists? A conclusion. So really the objective here, and what has allowed me to actually talk to some of my scientist colleagues who first said, Garry, you're going to ruin your career. Well, okay, whatever, it's too late for that. But I haven't. Because I basically say, look, if you and I can agree that the data is real, irrespective of what the potential conclusions might be, the hypotheses, then the onus is no longer on me to come up with an answer. Now it's also on you, because we're having a discussion about this. So it's believe the data, not the conclusion. Yeah. So you see the data, and that's where the fun is. That's where the hypothesis starts. So people have come up with all kinds of ideas, everything from future humans, future AI coming back to us because somehow they figured out time travel, to what's called the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis that they are part of. I'm sure some people here at least know what a von Neumann probe is, right? This idea of a self-replicating machine that could have been developed by a technology or a civilization on the other side of the galaxy that even in just a few 100 million years could make its way by conventional means all the way across the galaxy. And when it gets there, it basically builds copies of itself, and it does what it's doing, and it basically, some other civilization sent it out. Now, Avi Loeb was here last year, so I'm part of an SAB with Avi Loeb on a company called Copernicus Space Corporation, and guess what? Our objective is to build the first von Neumann probes to go out and spread humanity's original presence across all of reality. So that's one of the others.
Yeah.
A third one is...
Well, what do you, Garry, Dr. Nolan, you have to speculate. What do you think it is? Let's be bold.
I think it is an advanced form of intelligence, something that we don't understand, that is using some kind of intermediaries, however it is, like I said about you're not going to end up in the middle of the tribe, the angry monkeys that are flinging muck at each other, or nuclear bombs. You're not going to show yourself in the middle of the ambulance. You're going to send intermediaries. It's not that they walk amongst us, that wearing a skin suit are actually the alien. right? No, you're going to basically put something there that is, I think of it as an intelligence test. Can you see what's in front of you for what it really is? Yeah. Can you see the anomalous data point that is there that you realize what it is? I mean, when the South American native tribes first saw the Spanish ships coming across the horizon, they didn't realize what it was. They couldn't see it for what it was. So, you know, this is, as I said before, this is the kind of the wow factor. Yeah. That they're showing up, they're saying, well, who amongst you are intelligent enough to realize what it is that you're looking at? Yeah. They don't have to land on the White House lawn. We can always make the joke about, is there intelligence in DC at all, right? You just need to show yourself to enough to acculturate. Yeah. Now, if you've been around for a long time, and this is something that I do think has been, they've been around for a long time, they are affecting our culture. Right? It's actually often thought that many of the religions that we think of as the most important have been part of this process.
I mean, there are so many tangents to go down. We have about 1 minute and 45 seconds. Wow. We've covered a lot, though.
That seems like Jacques Vallée's argument, is that the NHI is somehow affecting our culture, affecting all of humanity. That it's a control system, is what he's argued, to affect our culture. It's also interesting, I didn't know he was in business with Avi Loeb to create the first von Neumann probes, the Copernicus effort. That's quite interesting. Create our own humanity Neumann probes to go and spread throughout the galaxy. Seems like that would be the next step of humanity, right? Would be to spread out, become multi-planetary, multi-solar area. He also highlights there again about what the NHI is. I'm glad he speculates. A lot of people will not speculate on that. Like he said, he likes to just stick to the data, but then he does speculate. It comes from a higher intelligence, some other intelligence, and they use intermediaries. That's why it seems so strange. And could the intermediaries be through our consciousness? It seems like consciousness seems to be a part of all of this. People have weird effects, weird time lapses. You know, is the interaction happening in some other part of our reality, right? Maybe it's not happening in the exact three-dimensional space-time that we understand. Maybe it's happening in some other consciousness realm. And that could lead to all of the strange, weird effects that we hear about. Extremely strange. All the woo.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think what you just said feels like it has strong parallels to religion, to what's happening with AI right now, to the simulation hypothesis. Like, they all are kind of saying something very, very similar here. Right. And I guess I'm curious, right, as we wrap this up, what happens next?
Well, what happens next is, I mean, what you're actually seeing is what's happening next is the professionalization of this, right? It's not just me. I mean, I have many now scientists with whom I'm working, right? There's Ryan Graves, who was one of the pilots that saw some of the objects in those videos. He's got the American Institute of Aeronautics and Engineers, 50,000 strong organization. He's got a group within them, as well as a 501c3 for civil aviation. Yeah. You know, we've used, and I'm just going to be honest, we've used the threat narrative that these things are showing up repeatedly. I mean, this is today. They're showing up repeatedly around our ships. So I think the objective has been to make it okay to talk about it. Yeah. Because we made it okay to talk about it, we opened the apertures on the filters on the sensor systems. That's what partly led to the seeing of those Chinese balloons. You wouldn't have seen them if it weren't for that. Yeah. Right? Because we created laws that said it's time to open the apertures, because they were only looking at particular flight paths of things that look like a missile or a plane. So that's the next part. I'm frankly involved with the development of a 501c3 myself. We're calling it the Sol Foundation. And our objective is to actually write policy papers for governments and commercial enterprises to basically give them the opportunity to think about it. It's not that it's going to happen tomorrow. It's a slow release process, we think, but to basically give that opportunity. And then to develop, what I'm doing actually is developing novel kinds of materials analysis pipelines for basically analyzing the material which is in the public sphere or the semi-public sphere, but then also, frankly, as a goad and a lure to bring in those who do have the stuff behind the scenes so that they can say, oh, okay, because I want to see it published.
Yeah.
I don't want to see it behind the scenes anymore.
Yeah.
And finally, what you're seeing is that a lot of people who are within the Intel communities as well are frustrated, and they want to bring it out because they haven't been able to figure it out because the best minds aren't working on it.
Yeah.
The crazy scientists at Harvard, MIT, Yale, or wherever are basically not allowed in because maybe they do a little bit too much of this or other things, and they couldn't get a security clearance if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So there has been a lot of progress, but there's also been a lot of setbacks, right? The UAP Disclosure Act was shot down. Arrow said there's absolutely no evidence for NHI, even though they have all access to the 40 plus whistleblowers, etc. So there has been setbacks for sure. And it's knocked some of the wind out of the whole UAP disclosure effort, but it's still going. Like Garry Nolan said, I made a video on his material analysis project. He gave a great briefing on how he actually analyzed these materials and saw interesting isotope ratios, etc. Ryan Graves is still pushing for American for Safe Aerospace. That act to try and get the FAA, other commercial pilots, as well as military pilots, to actually have an avenue to report UAPs. But the stigma is still there, right? The stigma is still an issue. Arrow hasn't helped. But I interviewed Claes Vaughn in Sweden, and he said just in the past 6 months, the stigma there completely went away. So now he's getting requests from all over the place to actually speak and talk, and people asking serious questions. So like Garry said, it does take time. It takes time for people just to change their views and start to accept that maybe this is possible, that it could actually be the reality. And like he said there, he's 100% sure. Man, that is pretty sure. And he's 100% sure that there are materials out there from non-human intelligence. Imagine that. Amazing stuff. So incredible interview. Thanks to Garry Nolan for all of his work and efforts on this. Hope you liked this video. If you did, please smash the like button. It really helps the channel. Just hit it. It's easy. Just hit the like button. Subscribe for future notifications. And if you want to support the channel, go to patreon.com/Chris Lehto or become a YouTube member here. You can watch the full interview without my reaction. Links are in the description. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.